Thank you again so much for joining. Really appreciate your time. If you don't mind, I'd love to just hear your name, your role, and a brief background of who you are as a data scientist.
Yeah, thanks, Cole. So I'm Deepak Garg. I work at Advertising Research Foundation that's based in New York, and I've been working for that company for about 4 years. Prior to that, I did my PhD in mechanical engineering at UCLA, where my work was purely computational. So there I used to write Fortran code in high performance computing. So I have like 10 years of coding experience. Mostly I've used two languages, the Fortran during my graduate work and then Python during my industry experience.
Yeah. And what are some typical projects that you work on as a data scientist?
So as a data scientist, it's a broad domain and it depends a lot on industry. So initially I was at pharmacy, I was in the insurance company, Pharmacy Insurance, and there we were mostly using SAS for a very good reason. And then here at Advertising Research Foundation, we use Python and are mostly Python because it's a very powerful data processing tool. And the projects are broadly categorized into advertising research and marketing analytics. So advertising research is a lot of companies are spending millions of dollars on the ad. And they would like to know when their ad is being shown, whether people are really paying attention or not. So they actually do controlled experiments with a lot of subjects. So like 200 or 300 people are brought in batches and they are being shown ad, and then invasive measurements are taken like their temperature, their eye tracking. In some experiments, EEG is also recorded just to measure whether people are like excited, sleepy, drowsy, or they're like a little angry, boring, they want to just leave. And it actually helps the advertisers just to place that ad in an appropriate context. So suppose if you're watching a horror movie, one of the things that was found, like a candy ad would actually suit best. If you're watching an action movie, what kind of ad suits best to the context so that it doesn't bore the viewers? And this matters because you're spending like thousands or millions of dollars in an ad. So that's actually the advertising research part of it. The second part of the projects that I usually work is the marketing analytics, like marketing mix modeling, multi-touch attribution modeling. Like if an advertiser is spending the money through different channels, which could be online, offline, Facebook, YouTube, they would like to see which part of the expenditure is actually beneficial to them and what part of the marketing is actually going waste. So they do usually do marketing mix modeling or multi-touch attribution modeling, like if a person is being subjected to ad several times. Whenever you show an ad to someone, nobody makes a purchase right away, right? So initially you see an ad and then, okay, I know about this product, but I'll not try it. And then you start watching that ad again and again, and then you genuinely become interested in it. And then one day you see an ad and you say, okay, let's do it. Let's make a purchase. This was in my mind last time. So you actually give the credit to that purchase, usually to the last ad, which is actually one way to model multi-touch attribution. But typically, the very first ad, which did not even do anything, but actually did register in your brain, had actually also helped in making the purchase, right? So that's actually the marketing analytics part of it.
That's super interesting. That's you're reaching into my domain a little bit as a marketer. It sounds like a lot of what you're doing, especially in terms of the eye tracking and EEG, that marketing psychology almost.
They call it consumer neuroscience.
Mhm. Are you on, more of the analytical side of these, experiments? Or I assume as a data scientist, you're crunching the numbers, understanding the statistical analysis of certain
Yes, I'm in
behaviors.
the analytical side. The experiments are done by other company, but I have a background in mechanical engineering, so I do have a very good understanding of the sensors, the placement, and so on.
Mm, that's really interesting. Wow. So, throughout these experiments, throughout these use cases that you have, tell me about your tech stack. Like, what is the IDE that you're using on a day-to-day basis? What are the languages that you're familiar with? Any other tools you wanna mention?
Yeah, so when I was using Fortran during my grad school, I was using Sublime Text as IDE. That was a very simple thing. And I was using Mercury as my code repository version control system. For Python, by default, I use Jupyter Notebook. It's actually very convenient to do the development. Once the code is set and developed, once we have a lot of Python files, then I use the Spider to run a series of cleaned up notebook. That's actually like a more like a semi-production thing, not a development or debugging thing. And I also use PyCharm if I have to do any web dashboard development. Like I also make web apps for my company and host it on Heroku or GCP App Engine or AWS Elastic Beanstalk. And then the library I use is actually the Plotly library. So the difficulty I was facing with Jupyter Notebook was they have a lot of brackets, a lot of nested bracket, like 5 or 6 nested bracket. And then it was very hard for me to keep track of it. So PyCharm actually does a very good job in formatting the Python code and keeping track of all the brackets, like small bracket, curly bracket, big brackets. So that's the only project I use PyCharm for. And then I have to do the deployment also. So I log into Heroku or AWS through the PyCharm terminal, and then I push my code onto, and then I do the deployment.
Are there any other languages that you use now besides Python?
Now I use R, but R is mostly a statistical language. Only if some of the stats module in Python is lacking, then only I switch over to R. I also use SQL, but that's only to pull data from the database. And so the SQL scripts are very much standard. I don't do too much of processing in SQL. I just join the tables, and I have the habit of pulling more data than what is needed, so that if during the analysis phase, if I realize that, oh, I missed this column, I missed that column, I don't have to go back. So if I really need 50 columns, I have the habit of pulling 150 columns, even those columns which are slightly related, simply because I don't have to, later on, if I realize that if I'm missing something or some column, then I don't have to go back to step one. I can straight away take the data I need.
What other tools are you using before Pieces to manage your workflow? Save code snippets, Python scripts that you're using in your everyday workflows, or to generate code if you have used any other tools for that?
So I just used to take screenshot or save as HTML. Sometimes that doesn't open. So to be safe, I also used to convert the web pages to PDF. And then after waiting for the conversion, I used to open it just to ensure that the conversion is smooth. So a lot of times the conversion wasn't smooth. Like even if you look at some of the lead code solution, for instance, the way it is designed, if you save as HTML, it doesn't save well. If you save as PDF, a lot of code gets truncated. So it's a little hassle to select all the working code, then click on print. Sometimes it saves, sometimes it doesn't. So I used to like spend 1 to 2 minutes in saving a code, which was actually a lot, I would say.
Like writing it out instead of just taking a screenshot and extracting that code?
Yeah.
What platforms were you extracting code from that you weren't able to simply copy and paste it?
So, like, suppose some of the codes I used to take from Leak Code, lot of codes I used to take from Stack Overflow, but then that I also used to run issues if the solution have a scroll feature on the right side. So someone has posted a solution which is very much in line, and then you need to scroll to the right, and then a lot of code used to get truncated. A lot of explanation also used to get truncated. Stat Exchange was also one website, but that was not for the code. That was mostly for the explanation part of it. Then there are a lot of websites like Real Python, Business Python also, which have like tutorials on different functionalities of Python or Pandas data frame, which I use. And I saved them because it used to tell all possible ways of doing something. So that was also like my study material. So for those also, I used to take the printout in a PDF format and then save it, and I used to save as HTML. So I used to like do it both ways just to be sure that I'm not losing a lot. So HTML by right click and then PDF, which used to take like 2 to 3 minutes, which is a lot, I think.
Right, and that's just saving of the code. How do you go about referencing, retrieving this code from these PDF documents? Are you just saving them to your, documents folder on your computer
Yeah, so
and
they were
then
like
searching
saved
for them?
locally. Yeah, they were saved locally. And then by default, I used to name the files with the title of the post, but that was also a little hassle. especially if the post has like special characters. You cannot name the file with special characters like colon or question mark. It gives you an error. So that used to happen rarely. Uh, but still, that was like a little bit of bookkeeping I had to do. And I was happy about it anyway, because I didn't know the quick and fast way of managing code then.
Right. And so once you went back into Jupyter Notebooks, for example, to reuse the code, were you able to copy and paste it from the PDF from there, or did you have to type it out once you're ready to use it?
I think I was able to copy and paste from the HTML version. From the PDF, I don't remember. Maybe sometimes I was, sometimes I wasn't. If it wasn't like a picture format, then I wasn't able to copy it.
Saving with pieces, how has that sort of changed your workflow in being able to capture these code snippets you find throughout your research and reusing them?
Yeah, so I was introduced to Pieces. Installation was a little intimidating in the beginning because there was like a lot of options, and I'm not that much into software development. So for a lot of options, I like took a middle ground, okay, blended, but that was just the installation part. I knew that I wasn't going to use all the features, but once I installed it, and then the most important aspect for the Pieces I installed was the browser extension. And then without restarting the browser, you just have to refresh, and then the buttons start showing up like copy and save, share, or ask Copilot. Those three were the buttons. So my favorite button was like copy and save. So immediately if I click on copy and save, suppose in a Stack Overflow website, immediately it gets copied into the Pieces OS developer app on my machine. And initially when I was not very much familiar with the pieces, I used to double check whether the copy and paste has gone right or wrong. And it was like working as expected with a lot of tags. So that actually saved me a lot of time. And during the first few days, I like saved over 50 code snippets. And then I thought maybe there is no need to save so much, because I was then saving everything that I was encountering. Then I started like going slow. So it was a breeze. It actually improved the code management, and I'm quite happy about it, that I don't have to wait for HTML conversion or PDF conversion and then manually check it. I can also retrieve the code very conveniently. The OCR feature actually works great. Even if I once took a screenshot and then I ported that screenshot to Pieces, it recognized that was like an SQL code. It actually recognized it very well. And it was actually done in a different format. So the code I used was a common table expression and then CTE in SQL. And then I just asked Pieces that, can you rerun this code to a subquery? And I think within a minute, it just rewrote that code in a subquery. So the bad thing for the Pieces with the developer is their development skill can get blunted if they are using Pieces a lot. They'll stop thinking, and then they can be dependent on the Pieces, just like the calculator spoiled us, just like the map spoiled us. People have stopped thinking. Now they have become more dependent on calculators. Even for simple calculation, I have seen someone using calculator like 21 plus 13. They are using a calculator.
Yeah. No, I totally understand. These are tools and they can be abused. I think the generative AI aspect is maybe one of the most debated tools throughout any generative AI tool. You have ChatGPT, you have GitHub Copilot, and so people aren't writing as much of their own code from scratch.
Yeah, I won't say it's an abuse. I would say it's an overuse, right? Suppose there are tight deadlines, you have a lot of coding to do. Then to save your day, to save your work, you can actually use Gen I. But other than that, I think if a developer really likes developing the code, then they should not be completely dependent on the Gen I code, right? Otherwise, it's not going to help them in the long run, right? Your abilities as a developer will wane down. It's great to have tool, but becoming totally dependent on it, I think, will affect their development capability. But I don't think Pieces will affect anyone's development capability. But yeah, a future version of Pieces 5 years from down the line, maybe someone would just give text instruction to Pieces like what to do, and then Pieces eventually will end up doing everything with a plugin or with its own in-house code. Will be like a total replacement for the developers.
Yeah, well, everything in moderation, right? And I think you mentioned some of those edge cases where it is you're on a tight deadline or there's something that you completely don't understand. For example, I heard from another user, they were involved in a hackathon and they were put on this team of three. The repository they were given was in Dart language, and they weren't really familiar with this language. And so they used Pieces to ask about the repository. Hey, what does this code mean? So that they could use it as a tool to start learning that language, to understand, okay, ask Pieces, hey, add inline comments to this repository. So you can understand what each line means and be able to write your own code based on what you learned from that. So do you think Pieces could be used in a way not only to shortcut your work, but also to help you learn?
Yes, certainly. And I have a very important, like practical use case. So there is a Chinese library G6, which actually is a very nice plotting library. And we used to make our tree graphs with that library. So we tried a lot of Python library, R library here and that, but the visualizations were not great. So luckily I had a Chinese colleague. Now he's in China. He only found this library. The name is G6. So he could actually browse through the manual in Chinese and the search forum also in Chinese, although it's written in English, but the discussion forum is mostly in Chinese, right? So, and he was able to make it work, and that actually produced nice tree graphs. So when he left, even though he taught me the G6 library, how to use it, I'm unable to use it because there is no one to turn on to help. So that's actually one thing where I think Pieces can help me if it has like this translate feature. A code is language agnostic, but the discussion part, if suppose it's written in Chinese and then there is a code and then there is a Chinese, Pieces can interpret Chinese to English and leave the code part as it is, then it would be like a huge boost, especially for the library that I'm saying.
Right. Yeah, and we're currently improving our retrieval augmented generation models to be able to scrape full documentation pages and understand not just the code snippets on that page, but also the languages, the copy in any language behind it. But I think definitely in your use case, there is the opportunity to understand the code by using Pieces, since it'll be able to understand those code snippets and tell you in a description that you can understand, this is what this code does. That's an interesting use case. And when it comes to back to the sort of saving aspects of Pieces, the automatic enrichment. So when you hit that copy save button on the browser, we're automatically saving that snippet to Pieces to your desktop app or wherever you are if you're using it in Jupyter Lab. But we also add an automatically generated title, description, tags. You mentioned that you like to title your PDF documents in the past when you saved code snippets. Do you find that these automatic enrichments are natural to you? Are easy to read, easy to understand based on what the AI is generating?
Yeah, so the title part, I always changed it, but yeah. So I won't say I was unhappy because I retrieved. I always put the tag, then a little description, and then at the end, I always put a timestamp. That's the way I save it, not necessarily Pieces does, and not necessarily because
Mhm.
there is also one way I really like to retrieve the documents. Sometimes we retrieve the documents by name, say, oh, I had a meeting with Cole, so I'll search Cole in my inbox. Another way to retrieve is, oh, I had a meeting with Cole 2 years ago. So let me navigate. And around Thanksgiving, I had a meeting with Cole. So I'll remember, yeah, I had a meeting with Cole around Thanksgiving in 23. So maybe 4 years down the line, I'll be looking at the timestamp. But that's another way to search it. So I also sometimes put a timestamp. Now in the PDF, there is already a timestamp written in the Windows machine, date generated, right? So in the pieces, there is no timestamp, at least I could find. So at the end, I used to write the timestamp. And the timestamp just means the month, day, and year, like 11/21/23. So I think that's the only thing I do. And the very first line, usually I put some tags like merge data frame, slice data frame, reverse this, reverse that. And then in the middle, I keep the heading pretty much as it is. But that's not very much. It's like the first tag and the last tag are like very much important for me to retrieve a document.
Hmm. Do you think that you would benefit if, speaking on feedback for pieces, do you think it would be beneficial if you had the ability to set the format for the way that your assets are titled? For example, in Windows, you can change whether you want your PDFs to automatically be timestamped with day, then month, then year, or year, then month, then day, or you could change the method in which the date is recorded. Do you think you would benefit from pieces having the option to automatically add the timestamp to the title?
Yeah, yeah, I think I would be benefited from that.
So tell me a little bit more about other ways that pieces fits into your development workflow as a data scientist.
So, like I say, I usually did not use for all the features. I use some of the features a lot, like saving code snippet and then asking few times like how can I do this, and it did well importing the image file, and then that was mostly a test, can you rewrite this. Other than that, I'm not using it very deep. I know there are like a lot of controls, lot of really controls out of it. So far I never felt the need for using all the features. So that's actually where my usage area is with the pieces.
Well, I'm interested in the features that you do use. You mentioned a use case earlier on in our call. Maybe you could talk me through one of the main use cases that or experiences that you've had with pieces.
Yes, so we usually distribute the cleaned up data set to our clients. So that's actually a syndicated study we do, and typically we get the data in the format. So there is like it's just like a simple CSV file with few thousand entries, but like a lot of columns, so thousands of columns. And I had the variable name, say Q1, Q2, Q3, because respondents are being asked a lot of questions. That's like question one, question two, question three, question four. And then the client's requirement was, can you add an additional header to the existing column so that there is like a little column description so that we don't have to open two files. The first file would be the data set. The second file would be the column name and the description, which is like a data dictionary. Everything would be like at one place. And then we can simply, while reading, we can skip the very first column and do the analytics. So it was like a two-in-one solution. I liked it. And then I struggled with it because I had the dictionary of column name and the column description. But in the pandas data frame, I was unable to insert the dual header. So I searched a lot. Search is also a skill these days. You need to use the right keyword. Otherwise, you just start getting gazillion results. And then after 3 or 4 pages, it's obvious that you are not using the right keyword. Sometimes we don't use the right keyword. So that was like one of those moments. And then I was getting a lot of results, like an upgraded solution, more difficult solution. Maybe the problem I was asking was a simple one, and I was unable to write the code for it. So I did get 5 or 6 solutions, which was like a more difficult use case for the problem I was trying to solve. And then I was saving that file, saving all the code, saving all the solution I was getting because it was still related to my problem, but not directly solving my problem. And I'd like spend already 2 hours trying to figure it out. I think after saving 4 or 5 lines of the code, one of the lines of the code which I found to be very much closest to my solution, I launched the Copilot and then asked Pieces, how can I add an extra header? How can I change this code to write an extra header with the dictionary name this? And Pieces immediately gave me a one-line solution. So I was reluctant. I thought, okay, let's try it, but I wasn't expecting it to be a working one because life has never been so much easy for me. I have never been so much lucky. And then I copied that line and then used it in my Jupyter notebook and it worked. So that was like, wow. And that's where pieces can stand sometimes to save you really. If you have like a time crunch, you have to leave for home, or you have to really, if there is like a quick turnaround time, then if someone knows pieces, in and out, then actually that can accelerate their workflow. It's like a, virtual colleague for you, right? It's like a virtual colleague for you who can do things for you. But I would say don't get too much hooked onto it. Otherwise your coding skills can be affected. And then maybe in your next tech interview, you won't be able to code well because they are not going to let you use pieces there, right?
Well, maybe not. Yeah. So do you think so you mentioned Pieces Copilot. gave you a really good answer based on the project that you were working on. Did you use the context feature where you set the context of your Copilot conversation based on that specific repository? Do
No,
you
I
find
don't think I used the context. I already had the code in front of me, and then I launched the Copilot. So first, I recall first I just asked, "What is this line of the code doing?" And then it gave me a little description, which I think was right. And then I say, "Okay, can you modify it so and so?" And then it modified it, and then I used it, and then it worked.
beyond the time crunch, do you think that there are any other productivity gains or efficiency boosts that Pieces gives you in your workflow?
Not for me, but like I say, I don't use all the features, but I'm I'm pretty sure there are like 70-80% of the features which look very promising and people can benefit from it, but I have not been able to tap its full potential, I would say.
Have you tried other generative AI tools in your workflow at all? And do you think that there are any instances of where Pieces might have provided something unique that those other tools didn't?
No, no, I mean, we had only been using Gen AI to summarize the documents which the whole world is doing. So nothing out of the world. But still, as a team, we are very much reluctant to be completely dependent on generative AI because a lot of our report lands on the desks of C-suite executives. So we are very much mindful of what we are publishing. So we want to take it slow as a company. We just don't want to be completely dependent on it and then send out something which we which we were not supposed to.
I totally understand. So you would say that using Pieces throughout your day-to-day projects is most impactful for you based on the code snippet management aspect of the
Yes,
application, right?
yes, the saving code, retrieving code, modifying it slightly. I would say understanding step, yeah, understanding what it's doing, and then there are like a lot of tags.
And you mentioned search earlier. Is that something that works well for you in Pieces?
Yes, I think I'm able to search it quite effectively.